controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are a science here to make things make sense.
Okay.
Okay, we are talking about lubrication, in particular, personal lubrication. So we're not talking about, a well-oiled machine.
Yeah,
or
isn't there like a franchise called Mr. Lube?
Yeah, we're not talking about getting your car lube. I don't.
Wow, it's
like,
really not about that. I don't even know what
that
even
is.
in your car needs lube.
Yeah.
Actually, now I'm like, okay, no, moving on. We're not going to talk about the French
we're
film where the girl has sex with the car.
So as we said, this will be like not like R-rated or anything, but obviously adult conversations. We're talking about lube as it relates to sort of like sex, and fornication.
So personal lubricants are specialized lubricants used during sexual acts to reduce friction. So we're talking about those ones.
Yeah. And interestingly, the lube market in this case is worth $400 million.
Oh.
Which actually I was like, that's not that much.
That's not that much. That's like a Marvel film.
I know.
Gets like triple that.
Which was kind of surprising.
Well, that's interesting.
At first I was like, wow, $400 million.
It's all about the way you say it. $400 million. It's like
I mean, that is a lot, obviously.
I don't think it's that much considering what this research made me think is lube is good.
Oh, interesting. Because
Like-
I have some counterpoints. I'm not saying it's not good.
Me too. I have some as well.
Okay.
But
Wait till the end of the pod.
No,
to
it's like,
make your
please don't
informed
turn this off and
decision.
think that it's bad. But I'm like, I do think what this research made me think about is sex education and being like, people need to know that lube is important. Because I maybe don't think it's the first thing that you think about buying when you're thinking about being sexually active.
True. And it's like condoms, especially when you're young, incredibly embarrassing to buy. Like it feels that way. Like you don't like literally one of the first times I ever bought lube and condoms, my like next door neighbor of childhood was behind me in line, and I was like mortified.
I know. See, I used to be mortified, but now I put it there with confidence, being like, yeah, I'm having sex. Like I put it down with like, yeah, you betcha, he's getting laid.
I still
But I
get
used to not.
embarrassed.
Oh, really? But it's a sign of being sexually active, which is like, cool.
I know, but then you're
Right?
like, it's like a teen at the counter when you're like checking out.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Oh,
not
yeah,
necessarily. I'm just, there's a lot of moments where I'm like, I don't want to have to like engage. Like if it's somebody my age who like I identify with, then fine. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're all on the same page. But if it's somebody who's like outside of my demographic, I feel like severely uncomfortable.
Maybe it's because I've had to buy like hemorrhoid cream and other things that are more embarrassing in like parts of my life that I'm like, this is now
I've had to do that
cool.
too. But I also like anytime I have to buy anything like sex related, I will also buy. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm grocery shopping today.
I guess we're getting Doritos. Yeah, you're like, oh, whoops. Oh my God. Sorry. I don't know why this is here, but I guess
Might as
I'll
well get
buy
it.
it.
Okay,
Okay, so
where do we start?
Well, what I found was interesting was that a lot of people might think that using lube, especially in heterosexual sex, which a lot of these studies are on, like are a sign that something's wrong. So it's like people are like being told like, why would you need lube? Because
You have like natural lubrication kind of thing. Yeah.
Whereas I think what like a lot of these studies found is that it pretty much always increased the comfort that people with vaginas felt when they were having sex. So I was like, that's really important to understand that like you can't just expect. And they were also saying for a variety of reasons, people with vaginas might have like lower like not personal lubrication, natural lubrication because of like stress, hormones, like so many different
you could just
things.
be dehydrated
that are
that
normal.
day.
Yes. And so it's kind of like, I don't know. I think it's important for people to not think that using lube is
like
a
a
sign of something
deficiency.
wrong, because in fact, what they have found is it made people both, if you're thinking of like a heterosexual, whatever, people with penises and vaginas, when lubrication was used, in the study that I found, it was like,
felt positive about it.
yes.
Yeah.
So 70% of people said that when they used lube, it made their sex feel more pleasurable and comfortable. That's people with penises and vaginas.
Okay.
And then this was another study specifically just on women, around 3,000 women aged 18 to 68, and 72% said that it contributed to higher ratings of pleasurable, satisfying sex.
Yeah, it's
so it's
amazing.
like, that's good. Like, I don't know.
At the bare minimum, having an increase of pleasurable sex, that's good. You
And
know?
I feel like-
especially if it's related to pain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like exactly. Like if the other option is being like, oh, I'm embarrassed to use it because it means that something's wrong with me and now I'm suffering through pain and all these things, it's like, that's weird. And the WHO's working definition of sexual health is the state of physical, emotional, and mental and social well-being in relation to sexuality. It's not merely about the absence of disease, dysfunction, and informity. It's also about like literally just like feeling good about it. So it's like if lube is
start that sentence again. I kind of missed what you were saying at the beginning.
Essentially, like the WHO's definition of like sexual health, it's not just about like STIs and all these things. It's about actually making sure people have physical, emotional, mental, and social happiness, good feelings during sex.
Yeah.
And if lube is contributing to that, these studies are kind of like,
that's a positive thing.
It's a positive.
Yeah.
It's like maybe the 400 million industry should be 600 million or free. Maybe it should be free.
Right. Or at least like education around it. If it gives people mental health in their sexual endeavors, then that's worth investing in for people to know, like, and destigmatize having lube accessible.
Yeah. Just like as a gay man, like lube is in our lives for variety of reasons because it's like I don't have quote unquote the ability to lube my ass. So I just feel bad that if people's vaginas are feeling like they have to be doing it naturally, and if they don't, it's a sign of something bad. I'm like, that sucks. Because a lot of these studies were saying that's what kind of the way some people are told or thought.
That makes sense. I've never really thought about it before because I don't have a vagina, obviously, and I think you're right. It's easier when you're having anal sex. It's just kind of not always expected, but primarily expected that lube will be used. That it's just like it's just how it goes, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas, when you're kind of like, well, maybe there's this choice and maybe it's like, maybe lube isn't so handy, so we're just going to do it without. Whereas, like, that's way harder if you're going to be doing it up the butt. You know what I mean? It's not that you can't, and people use, like, spit and other things, but, like, it is more expected to be pleasurable for both ends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're going to use lube as use anal sex.
What was interesting was that another like meta-analysis found that the only study found that some people who said it made them feel worse was gay men who were receiving anal sex.
Okay, I think I read this same study and was so confused by this.
It was so confusing because then they said overall people said it helped
better.
both ways. I know.
Yeah, okay. I literally
I read
decided not to include that study, not because it was bad. It was like a meta-analysis of all lubrication, right? And the part about gay, it was like gay by men. At first it said men who used lube in their most recent encounter said it hurt more.
It hurt more.
But it's not
when they were receiving anal sex.
Yeah, but then like 2 sentences later it was like, but both receiving and giving was less painful.
I think what it was like overall they said the study wasn't that good because it was just surveys.
All self-reporting.
It was all self-reporting, and it was like, I think that what they were saying was there was a variety of questions about timeline. So when they were asked about their most recent sexual like experience, for whatever reason, a significant amount of people, it was like 40% or 30% of men who had bottomed said it had made them feel worse. But then I think there were other questions just about in general, and they found it was like 70 or 80% of men said it even while bottoming made them feel better. Yeah. So I think it was like a weird survey probably of so many questions.
Yeah. And they were kind of answering two separate things.
But it was the only study where anyone was like, oh, it made them feel maybe even worse.
And I then went to the actual study. I could only get access to the abstract, but it didn't say anything about that. And I was like, it must be in the study, but I was just like, that's not what the abstract makes it sound like this study's about. But what I sort of surmised is maybe, and this is total conjecture, there could be a world where when, for example, a top or bottom are using lube, that they're maybe feel like they can be more aggressive and as a result maybe end up hurting themselves more. You know, sometimes you feel like, oh,
I'm like clenching my asshole right now. Like I'm just like, I saw this talk about lube. I'm like,
okay, but we can move on from this section.
There's some other studies that are kind of linked to that thought.
Yeah. How about before we get there, I wanted to talk about just the different kinds of personal lubricant. Like,
because there's a lot.
There are, but there's kind of like 3 main categories. And I honestly, personally, didn't really know the difference. And I, again, have always been embarrassed to go buy lube. And I feel like I've either just like relied on you getting it or just grabbed something off the counter not knowing like, is this for my butt?
Yeah, I remember when I was younger and embarrassed, I bought the one that was like animal grade so that like if anyone thought I'd be like, I could just be like cleaning out my like dog's ass. Like, because there always would be like all this sexy kind of like shaped like a like dildo, like pink and black, and it's like for her and it's like for him. Ugh. Then there'd be like there was like no name brand
cow
like,
on
animal like, and I was like, well, I'm gonna use that so that no one knows.
Yeah,
but
it's for my work.
Yeah, like I'm a vet. Oy vey, all the in school for vetness.
Okay, so type number 1. is water-based. So these are water-soluble, which means they absorb, like dissolve in water, and they're the most common types of lubricant.
And if you're looking at lubrication, it would just say on it probably like
water-based, yeah.
Okay.
And so these, the viscosity of it can depend on how much water is actually in the product itself. But something you might notice with these kind of lubes is that they actually can absorb into your skin, and then they tend to dry out during use. So like if you've ever used a lube and it just kind of like goes away after a while, it probably was water-based.
I'd rather you can reactivate it with more saliva.
Yeah. Saliva or
true?
water. That's what it was saying, was that it can, if you use some water or saliva, it might kind of like reactivate it. But I feel like...
I know, I read that too and was like, I mean, it's good to know. I've never tried it myself.
Give it a try.
We might.
Funny, it's like they are typically incompatible with sex in the water. Because they're you can't use. I guess people have sex.
Oh, because it's just like like literally like
absorbs into the water.
Whereas oil based would be more easily.
You could still like be lubricated underwater. Do you
know
what I mean?
Sex underwater. I'm just like, good job. Like I've never. Now I'm like, is that a podcast episode?
It could be sex under, or just like maybe you're at a waterfall and you're like beside it,
or
in the shower.
The
I love how we're like thinking in the
hot.
depths of like
but
a
like
lake.
the sex like underwater thing, and just like I mean with gay sex, it's like there's a lot of prep, and I'm just like I don't know. I'm just like no, we could just do this above like.
What do you mean?
It doesn't seem like something to me that's like been offered up or like the opportunity hasn't come up that much. And if it did, I think I'd be like, let's raise our dick and ass above the water just for a bit. Like I just feel like there's no part of me that's like
I'm already douche.
Fish.
I don't need to shove more water up there.
Exactly. And it's like, see the like fish underwater, like this makes sense for them. We human, we on land, we have sex on land. But sorry, like I'm like don't want to get like dragged in the comments for being like, you're a kink shaming sex
No. Like good for you if
water
you can
sex.
do that and it feels good and you're into that. I feel like
don't
everyone
use water-based lube
in the water.
Yes.
It wouldn't be that useful. It's not like you're gonna die from it. It's just not gonna be that helpful.
Or in the shower.
There are some risks to water-based lube, and that is mainly some studies have found that it can damage human rectal tissue. Also because it absorbs so much. There's been some concerns around like it absorbing into your body. And I'll talk about this a little more later, but some have, in some studies, actively shown to reduce the replication of HIV, which is obviously a concern.
Wait, reduce the replication of HIV?
Sorry, increase. If I said
okay, I was like,
in a
that
bad
sounds...
way. No, in a bad way. So like the lubrication itself makes a better environment for HIV.
Okay, so this is when we're gonna say always use lube with condoms.
Yeah. So that is the other angle. So they're often this kind of lube is often recommended because it's compatible with condoms. Like it doesn't cause as much slipping. Water-based works well. They do not with latex condoms.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, that's more clear.
It doesn't weaken the condoms, and because of this, it's still recommended even when it comes to HIV because ultimately the condom is what's preventing the HIV. Or obviously there are other means like drugs you can be on and other methods of prevention, but it's not the lube in the first place that you're like should be concerned about.
Yeah. So to be clear, water-based lubrication works better with condoms because it's not going to deplete or like make the condom weaker or slip off more easily, which is like oil-based.
So oil-based is the next section, and there is an increased risk of breaking the condom and of it slipping off or just like slipping and,
So because the water-based one might have that specific study saying that it could increase like the replication of HIV, it's very important that when you have water-based
lube, you're wearing a condom.
You're wearing a condom, or you're with someone who
Oh, yeah, fair.
Like has taken the right precautions. Like, there's so much talk about lube in these studies, and then they always at the end are like, wear a condom. I'm like, I'll start with wear a condom.
Yeah, I'm picturing using the lube on top of the condom.
Exactly, but I guess, I think a lot of people might not.
Yeah, both
I'm
straight and queer people.
With condoms. I cannot believe how many gay men are not.
Yeah,
it's weird.
I mean, I guess we've talked about this either on the pod or in episodes about like the perpetuation of porn that is without condoms and stuff.
And even the idea of PrEP being like, okay, well, now I'm on PrEP, let's not use a condom. I'm like, there's other STIs, my friends. Anyway, so all of this to say, these are talking about lubes like with condoms for safe sex.
I mean, that's what we're promoting. It's not necessarily what the studies are talking about. Mm-hmm. But like, we're saying like, obviously that's your mode of protection if you're worried about getting an STI or HIV or anything like that. Okay. Number 2, oil-based. So this would be like petroleum jelly, which is like very you're gonna get a good amount of lube here. Do you know what I mean?
That's the one that I was buying.
Yeah.
It was like animal grade. but there's other oil-based lubes, right? That are probably not petroleum jelly.
Yeah, it's just I just mean petroleum jelly is an example of one.
Okay.
And it was said like this could be ideal for people in monogamous relationships who don't require condoms. I mean,
Gotcha, because it can make a condom slip off.
I shouldn't say
easily.
monogamous relationship is the only situation where that's appropriate. I'm just saying if it's not a worry to you, like say you're only having sex with one person, you're not worried about getting a disease or having kids or whatever, like maybe this could be an option for you.
Sex is so funny. I feel like you have to be so careful. Like
I know
because every time I say anything about it, I'm like, am I like saying something wrong?
No, yeah, we're just double checking what we're saying because A, I don't want to in any way ever be not sex positive, and B, everyone's in different situations and different kinds of relationships.
But even like sex positive, I'm like, what does that mean?
Well, I don't want to shame someone for something that they enjoy.
Yeah.
And like everyone can make their own personal decisions in their life if it only affects them.
Yes.
Obviously things like STIs can affect other people, and so I think education is like really important. But at the end of the day, like there's certain decisions you get to make for yourself. And some people are bothered by certain kinds of lubrications or condoms or get like who knows. There's lots of exceptions out there.
I'm always like, yeah, I'm sex positive. But if someone were to ever be like, what does that mean? I'd be like, I'd fall over and faint. Like, I'm like, I actually don't know. I'm like, am I sex negative? Like, I don't know. Like,
I think everyone thinks they're sex positive up until the point that they.
I'm literally like, you have
line.
to wear a condom. You have to, or else you can't get. It's like maybe people will be like, you suck. I don't know.
Yeah. That's why it's like to each their own in that regard. If you want our advice, we can give it, but it's like you do what you want to do. Again, oil-based can also affect the elasticity of condoms. So going back to like obviously like you're gonna get a lot of slipperiness, which could be good, but with condoms it might be more complicated.
So stick to the water-based condoms if you're maybe
and the sort of final and it said like some people prefer to use this because of like all the different additives that might be in other lubes. Like and there
you mean petroleum jelly?
Yeah, like oil-based I guess can maybe be more simple.
Like I'm sorry, but like heating and cooling lubes.
Yeah, fucked up.
But also now we just kink shamed. There, you're not sex positive.
Sorry, no,
calling. Excuse me. As someone who happens to be in the heating lube community, I am pissed off at you.
Let me clarify what I was trying to say. I'm a baby when it comes to any kind of like too much fun down there, and it hurts me.
I know, like heating and cooling. Apparently, some have peppermint
that's why I
in
said it.
Like,
I think that's like fun if you're into it, and if you can. Like to me, even like a little soap that has peppermint in it, I'm like, I'm on fire.
I know, like those like Dr. Schroeder's peppermint.
Yeah.
I remember where I was the first time I used that on my
too.
hole.
Was it in Detroit?
Detroit. Yeah. Oh my god.
And I was like,
screaming.
This can't be good.
So like, I know. I always when I'm buying lube, I'm like, okay, well, I'm skipping over the ones that have like a goddamn hot pepper on them because like, what? That's not the vibe. But like. Also, I was reading about what was in those, and it was like really confusing, and there wasn't much research on it. That to me personally, I was like, I'm gonna avoid that.
Like when there's the hot,
when there was like heating and cooling. When I was reading, trying to find studies about the ingredients, it like wasn't very clear. There weren't very many studies. There's not that much studies on this in general.
Most lube is not regulated in the U.S. on humans. It has to be tested on animals.
I know. Apparently, it's guinea pigs.
Oh, and then I know I was like, are they like
and rabbits
up their butts?
I know. I'm so sorry. The saddest part about science is just.
But
like,
actually, I don't think I don't think they are because I.
What are they doing? Then?
I feel like I read using a lot of lubes as anal lube is considered like an. What do you say? Like not the proper. They wouldn't say not the proper use. They're just saying like this is not the intended use. So they're studying it for.
Oh my god.
Other cases.
I just can't believe when people are like, "Oh, you're gonna go be the guinea pig." I'm like, they're literally testing lube on guinea pig.
That's really fucked up. Everything gets tested on animals. It's so sad.
I know. Should we do an episode about animal testing? And it'll be the most depressing episode ever.
Yeah.
But anyways, lube is good. Okay.
Okay. Final kind. Or at least
God,
in the three main. This is number 3. Silicone.
Okay.
So it contains no water. It's not absorbed into the skin or mucous membrane. Cool. For this reason, it typically lasts longer. Like you don't need to reactivate it or use more. However, not all are certified latex safe, meaning like they might,
with a condom.
Yeah. in a good way. There's at least no current evidence that shows they increase the risk of HIV transmission.
Okay.
Some advice: don't use silicone lubrication with silicone sex toys. Apparently, it can dissolve the surface, which makes like a really bad surface for bacterial growth. And then when you open a condom and it's pre-lubed, it's usually silicone lube because it lasts so much longer. So that's why, and it's typically compatible with latex. So like if a condom is pre-lubed, it's probably that.
Huh. That's the other thing that like is cool about being gay is that like everywhere you go, there's just like lube and condoms everywhere, like in a little basket, like in a bar.
Yeah, every bar, every place. You're right.
I wish that there was lube in every bathroom because I'm like, it is good.
Yeah, and condoms and lube should just be like, wherever you could happen to accidentally have sex.
So the issues that I found with lube, like the like negative studies that I found, one was saying that they found a study of anal sex. People who consistently use personal lubricant for rectal intercourse had a higher prevalence of STIs. But the study didn't account for the people who were using more lube were having more anal sex, who were having more sex in general with increased STIs.
That's what I would think. Yeah.
That's like the same. That a lot of these studies, that happens a lot. It's like people who do poppers have, like it leads to, they found that people who do poppers have a high likelihood of having STIs.
Right.
But that is...
Obviously, the poppers are not giving them STIs.
Yes, and they're not taking into consideration the fact that people using poppers might be having more sex.
Yeah.
And it's just like, the study blatantly said that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't think that the lubrication should be linked to the increased STIs and anal sex.
I think it's probably one of those things that I don't think that's the case, but it probably just has to be investigated further, right? Like those are the things you find in science studies. You find associations, you find relationships between things, but those are not necessarily causative, right? Like just because people who are having more sex get more STIs, well, it probably is because they're having more sex, but it might not be.
Yeah,
there could be something else going on. So same with the lube. It's like perhaps like here's what the study finds is people who use more lube have more STIs. Is it the lube or is it just that people who have more sex?
I mean, it's just good to know that. So if you read like a headline, it's not like, oh my God, lube causes STIs.
Yeah.
Although this one thing I read was that spermicidal lubricant, which I didn't even know that was an option.
Is meant to like kill sperm?
Yeah, it said it can destroy vaginal and rectum cell membranes and in theory could increase STIs. But I didn't even know you could get spermicidal lube.
Would people use that to minimize STI or is that to stop getting pregnant?
No, it would be like a pregnancy thing.
Okay.
That's what they're saying is that they've found that it can destroy
Right.
vaginal and rectal cells. So then they don't know, they haven't done like an STI. They're like, in theory, could that
It
be
might
bad?
aggravate
But then I was
it.
like,
Yeah.
I didn't even know, like check to find out if it's spermicidal. I didn't know there was spermicidal lube in the world.
Oh, I actually did kind of know that, but actually I think to talk about being pregnant, because obviously most of my purview of lube is like in the gay world and not thinking about pregnancy.
Yeah.
But obviously many people want to get pregnant and still might want to use lube. You know what I mean? Or like may still want to have comfortable sex when they're like trying to get pregnant. So there are certain lubes that if you're trying to get pregnant, you shouldn't use. Not because it's like bad, but
no, that's really
for
interesting.
example, even it was saying like outside of the traditional lubes you would buy, saliva and olive oil are detrimental to sperm function.
Whoa.
So like if you're trying to get pregnant, it's better not to use saliva.
Oh my God, hitting the olive oil.
I know, I'm just thinking of like
Exciting.
being a kid. I don't know if we're going to go there.
No, we're not going to go there.
Being
We're
a young
not
gay kid is crazy.
Gonna go there.
These studies found that even some commercial lubes that label themselves as non-spermicidal have still been found to damage sperm function. So there are some vaginal lubricants like mineral oil, canola oil, and one was called
canola oil?
Yeah, and one's called
these are what you should be doing?
hydroxyethyl cellulose-based lubricants are recommended
when you're trying to have a baby.
Yeah, for vaginal
How do you
sex
get the canola oil? It's
I mean,
time
like,
to make a baby.
okay, that is just what I read in one thing, and I'm not promoting you go.
I don't want you to go to your
canola.
kitchen cupboard for some reason. It's like go
And canola
talk to your
oil
doctor.
feels like thick.
I know, and also it's like I love how they're like not olive canola. It's like a recipe. It's
Yeah,
like,
I want to be clear. Like
go talk to your doctor about the lube for
that was honestly probably just one line I read in either like a paper or just an article, and I just wrote it down here, so I didn't like research having sex with canola oil.
I think the most interesting thing is that if you're trying to make a baby, it is worth thinking about the lube. Just being like, asking your doctor and being like, wait a second, because this is something else that's going in there.
Yeah, and honestly, I bet even our friends in like heterosexual relationships who intentionally were trying to have kids probably did go through these things. When you hear people are like trying to sync up certain cycles and having sex at certain times,
thought
like
about the lube.
especially if you're having a hard time having kids, you probably talk to your doctor, and your doctor probably goes like, try these other lubes.
But no,
instead.
I still think it's interesting. There still might be people out there who are just like, holy shit.
It's
just the routine.
It's
to
worth
get the
thinking
lube.
about. Do some research and figure out what is best for you.
But as like gay men,
Yeah.
lube has always been involved, right? Like, do people have?
Well, have you seen Brokeback Mountain?
Yeah, I have. And
It's not that realistic.
Did not understand what was going on there, because you know what? They might have had canola oil because they were fishing, and they could have made some fish with the canola oil, and that would have been really good for that scene.
To just like grab some oil.
Because it was supposed to be raw, no pun intended. And I feel like there would have been something so real about him being like, go get the canola oil.
To be fair, though, no, they were in the moment, and I think people do that.
But there's something so real about being in the moment
and being like,
having
it's not working.
We have a family, and we like have to, I don't know, like this has to like work in a way that's like, wait, I don't know why I said we had a family now.
Yeah.
It's like too caught up in the plot. No, there's something about like the physics of that scene.
Oh my God.
In the end, this episode is about physics and friction. And I just think it could have added a layer of interest for them to go get the canola oil.
That's fair. The movie was too early in the like queer people being accepted on movies that I don't think they could be like, let's add a moment where the anal sex is so painful that they realize that they actually need a lubricant, and now they're panicking, rummaging around trying to find like butter.
Yeah. And I am like, I you're right. It was a lot to ask for something made in like 2003 or something. But it was a funny thing to watch as a gay man. I feel like a lot of gay men are like, well, that's not realistic, even though it was like a beautiful scene.
But I think, to me, it's not necessarily realistic, but if you've never also had gay sex before, or like anal sex, I should say, as they
you might not have lube.
Yeah, you wouldn't think about it. You might not even realize like what's it gonna feel like when we try this. Like,
well, Jake Gyllenhaal took it well.
I need to rewatch that.
It's so good, but it's so depressing. Like, you know, the narrative around like, we need queer stories where like they don't just get like absolutely obliterated and ripped in half by horses. It's like, that is what actually that movie is. That it is beautiful and amazing,
right,
but it has
tragic
aged in like an interesting way.
Yeah, it's nice to see a queer movie that is like positive now.
But like, are there any? Now that I'm thinking about it,
I just mean like there.
Simon.
Yeah, and there's like Young Royals, my favorite TV show.
What?
Young Royals, like that Netflix. So it's still like conflict and drama.
But
but you're like overall, you're like happy that these
I know.
people
I need
get
to watch
like,
more kids. I feel like it's the adult gay movies
adult.
that are like
traumatic,
murderous and traumatic. But no, there are other good ones, right?
I think there are lots, and even there's just so much queer representation. Like even watching Drag Race, you know what I mean? Like, there's lots of queer people on television now that are not just actually. I mean, Drag Race does actually exploit them for their most traumatic stories as well.
They're like, now look at yourself as a kid. What's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? Say it to the kid.
However, having said that, there's still many beautiful, just positive, amazing moments about friendship and like kinship and stuff like that. And I think that's
and there's
more
talk
prevalent.
about lube.
Yeah, I guess.
What are like famous lube? Like Astroglide? I feel like there's gay
KY Jelly. That's I think the famous
There's
one.
like gay man lube that's probably like Axe
so
body spray has advertising
that
I don't know about.
There are specifically lubes that are labeled anal lubes, and that's usually because they're thicker, like as opposed to rather than more liquidy, they're more like jelly.
Also, you can use it for masturbation.
Oh, yeah.
Which I actually only started doing recently and was like, I have been missing out on my goddamn life. Like, what the hell? Like, every movie, it's like, get the Vaseline or like, get the hand, whatever.
Yeah, people say you can actually use hand cream, not for sexual stuff.
But for masturbation.
Yeah.
But it's like, it is funny that I'd never even thought about that.
I don't need to go there, but it's not for me.
Lube and masturbation?
Yeah, I don't know why. It's just not
well,
for me.
it wasn't for me until I turned like
I'm not
32.
saying I haven't tried it. I've tried it, and I'm always like, yeah, it could be better without it.
Oh my God, he likes the raw hand.
Okay. So I don't want to end on the risks, but I had one last little section about a few of the risks that are worth being aware of and studies that have shown risks. So like, for example, some anal lubes are labeled as numbing which they say is like not necessarily good because you may
And you
not be
can't
aware
feel.
of injury.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, which obviously in the moment you might think is good.
Numbing. Like what? Like lidocaine or something?
I don't know what's in it, but it obviously just like makes you not feel as much pain.
Whoa.
Which you might think is a
That's
good thing, but
interesting.
obviously it's like when you take pain meds, when you're in pain, it's like the pain is sometimes there to tell you that you're like doing damage, right?
Interesting.
In animal testing, one study
On
in
guinea
particular-
pigs.
yeah, one study in particular did find that herpes transmission was 9-fold with the use of lube compared to no lube.
And this is without a condom, though, right?
Yeah. We're not
Yeah.
talking about using condoms. I'm saying that's
That's-
why sometimes they're like, is the lube providing an environment to transmit more easily?
In animal, that is.
I know,
That needs
I
to be
know.
studied more.
I'm
that's
also just like so curious.
because it's an animal thing. It's like, okay, you would want to know what the relation is in humans, and then again, it's just like wear a condom.
Yeah.
Unless you.
But again,
person's been
it's
tested.
education, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like people can make their own decisions as long as you know what the possible risks are and everyone involved is consensual. That's what I think.
Yeah.
In
Sex
2007,
is so interesting.
yeah, it's very, because you're right. Because you're right. You haven't said this yet, but it's like, it's taboo, and it's also like part of sexual appeal can be, you know, just in the moment or being a bit risky, but then that can also tap and slide into spaces that are unsafe for somebody.
And
but
like fetish and kink, I like don't know how to talk about it properly. Like I just don't. Like I just know that.
yeah,
like,
we should. I know when we did an episode on fetishes, some people reached out and they were like, you should bring some like people on the pod who like either study that or like are part of those communities, because
Yeah.
it might bring another angle that we aren't like super aware of or
Totally.
not that educated on, which
Yeah.
we definitely, I would be happy to revisit that as a podcast episode and bring somebody who like could help us navigate how to talk about those even outside of the science of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It feels like it's a hyper, like, I don't know what the word is. It's like a hyper confusing thing to talk about more than even like quantum physics. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm like, or like dark matter. It's like there's something about like sexual like kinks and fetishes that I'm like, that's actually more confusing to me than like
Because there
literally
are
dark
really
matter.
big social implications.
Oh,
our
the
sign
light went out on our thing. And that's what it is.
there
Like
you go.
kink community's mad.
No, I think everyone is aware of that, and we're in a world where at least it's being discussed a lot more, and I think there is a
Yeah.
lot more positivity around sex and education, but that leads to more people talking about it
Yeah.
and giving their opinions, which we're even doing right now.
Yeah.
And of course that leads to people who feel like they're being either left out of that conversation or misrepresented in that conversation or not seen properly in that conversation.
And sex is just so like big. It's just like it's so part of everyone's life and like watching a goddamn
even when it's
TV
not
show or whatever.
Even people like, not to put this on anyone else, but some people are like not interested in sex, but that still is a
Yeah,
thing. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Or some people like, you know, in the gay world now, it's like you can be a side. You can be somebody who like isn't.
Wait,
a
what's
to-
that again?
It's like you're not a top or a bottom. You don't want to have anal sex,
Yeah.
but you're like down to do other stuff. I think that's what it
Oh,
is.
that's a side. Because wasn't there like a day when Grindr was like, you can write you're a side?
Yeah, I think that means.
Wait,
like,
but does that mean like you can still rub a dick, or do you not even want to rub a dick?
I think side means you just don't want to have anal sex.
Oh, okay.
But I'm gonna do my little research after this.
Well,
but
because then there's asexuality, which I think
Yeah.
is like so interesting.
So even in the conversations around what we don't like, it can often relate back to sex.
True.
Okay, finishing up my risks, or the risks that I was going to talk about. I did mention like the rectal tissue issues. So certain lubricants were found to do significant damage. It said major shedding of cells from tissue samples biopsied 60 to 90 minutes after lubricant application was observed.
Any? Oh.
This didn't say specifically, but I think that probably was the water-based. But then they're saying water-based is better with condoms.
But like, would there be less shedding and damage with no lube?
I think that's their point. Yeah.
That's so confusing to me.
Yeah, you're right. It's like, wouldn't there be like way more aggravation?
Well, and also all the positives about lubrication
I think
are that exact reason.
Yeah. I don't know.
But that's
like,
mostly on vaginas, so I don't know.
and it's interesting to talk about things at like a cellular level, because of course then you're evaluating how like a quote unquote chemical, which may not be necessarily like toxic or something, is impacting cell tissue. But there's also something to be said about like physical trauma.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And like having a different kind of impact on cell tissue or like function at large. not necessarily on individual tissues.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that risk
thing.
would also, again, be relating to STI. So it's like, wear a condom.
Yeah. And then there's one final thing, lubricants that contain the ingredient chlorhexidine, which is an antibacterial agent, has been shown to kill 3 species of lactobacillus.
Oh, like good bacteria?
Yeah, basically in the vagina, which is like, it can make, how do you say this? Like unbalance the natural flora, which could lead to infections such as bacterial vaginosis. So
say that chemical again.
it was called chlorhexidine, which was an antibacterial agent. In much the same way, like even antibacterial soaps and stuff, sometimes it's like, it's maybe not worth, like, you don't have to kill all the things in your body. Like not all bacteria is bad. And so that's just worth knowing, especially if you have a vagina. I assume it might do the same thing in your anus. I don't know.
In general, though, it helps with pleasure.
Yeah.
It helps decrease pain.
Yeah.
It helps decrease, in many cases, also the physical damage of sex.
Totally. Yeah.
Pro lube
obviously, me too. Obviously, having a positive sexual experience, I would value, unless we knew these were like causing cancer and doing these. That is not the case, right? Like these are like some risks that come with using it, particularly with anal sex.
Slap on a condom and use some water-based lube. Let's go. Without chlorhexidine.
Or silicone. That was
silicone.
That was kind of like the other variety that didn't have those associations. That was almost like a better alternative.
And that's just not on your sex toy that's made out of silicone.
That was kind of like their only thing. The only thing I came across that was like, be careful with that. Because that's what's already on a condom. If it's dipped in lube.
I love lube.
I love
I
lube.
do. Like, I just am like, I don't know. It's something I learned when I turned
I want
30.
to
love
go
lube.
to like a sex store and
Me
like
too.
look and be like, have someone teach me and then actually find. Because I've never really explored this area. I've just kind of like taken what I can get.
Yeah,
like,
I haven't been to
like,
a sex store in years.
Me either.
That would just be fun to do. Like, just eat an edible and just be like, what are the options?
I definitely am not eating an edible.
Okay, well, I will.
I'd be
But, like, it
absolutely
would just-
losing my
I just feel like
freaking mind.
From when I used to go to the one when I was young and like discovering my sexuality, it had theme park energy. There's just so many like, it's like
Things to look at.
and they're all things that you're not
what is
seeing in
that?
other
Yeah,
stores.
yeah.
Whereas like, and if you go to like any pharmacy or any store, period, you're like, I've seen this before. 'Cause it
Yeah,
was, like,
every
in-
aisle is the same.
Yeah,
and,
it's like a grocery store has a pharmacy section or whatever. But when you go to a sex store, you're like, well, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I mean, and we should also go to one like in the neighborhood here because I feel like it'll be catered towards like things that we'll want to use.
Yeah, the one that I used to go to in Toronto was on Yonge Street. Reach out if it's still there, because it was like it was like adjacent enough to the queer gay area, but like not exactly in it. So like obviously like a like straight person who wasn't comfortable with their sexuality could walk in. But it was
Right.
still like if in the
Clearly-
large scale of Toronto, it's
Yeah,
like
you're like
it's where
there's
the
a whole
gays are.
section of all like gay
Yeah.
related sex stuff.
Yeah. Or
Do
just
you remember
like
the name, or it was just like on Young
It was
Street?
like sex spectations or something like that. It was, everyone would know, like it was like a 4-story building on Yonge Street near all the strip clubs. It was fun. I used to go there as a kid and just be like,
I grew up in a small town. We didn't have any of this.
yeah, honestly, that is one thing. I got to go in there and like.
It's probably why
kinda-
I'm like literally still shake when I'm like buying lube. I'm like,
Yeah.
I swear it's not for me.
I would just go in and get like kind of hard because I'd be like, there's like porn everywhere on the, like not actually porn, but it'd be like a hot guy's body beside the dildo of the that you're
Yeah.
buying, because the dildo you're buying is supposed to be that hot guy's dick.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's like walking through an underwear aisle and you're like, I'm so turned on.
Yeah.
Especially as a young kid who's like closeted.
Yeah, like, I guess we're gonna go buy socks again, right?
Yeah.
Because they're near something else we like.
One last thing I'll say is when I was young enough that you knew me, like so in university, I think I was still like, I don't want to have to buy condoms and lube. A, I was cheap, and B, probably too nervous to buy it, and would like, you know, gay clubs have them all over, and I would literally pocket like hundreds of them.
Yeah, I remember doing that.
They were
too.
free. I wasn't like
Yeah.
stealing them, but I would be like, this is my
That's good.
In the
Those-
winter, I would just like put them in my
That's
jacket.
so good. That is such a good indication of how that
works.
works. Putting
Yeah.
them
It's
in-
available.
I
Yeah.
think that condoms and lube should be in every goddamn bar and restaurant. Like, why
Yeah.
not?
You're right, and it was in the bathroom, so it was a place that wasn't like out in the open where everyone would see you taking it. Obviously, there's people in the bathroom that can see you if you're with them.
But even like a gorgeous, classy, hip restaurant that only has natural wines, you go in, they have their like
Yeah.
really pretty wallpaper, and they just have this little bowl where there's like, thinking about the Aesop soap and then a bowl of condoms and lube. That's a conversation starter. You walk back, A, if you're on a Tinder date, it's like, okay, there's a conversation starter that could help with the sex. B, it's like, it's cool. It's safe. It's sexually positive.
Right.
I like it.
I don't disagree at all. I think obviously restaurants and bars are trying to define their feeling and vibe, and that might create a vibe that they're like not going for. You know what I mean?
I know, but I
think it's a very positive thing to do, but it might be like insinuating like, oh wait, are we supposed to be having sex here?
Well, okay, but it's gorgeously designed. There's like a Swedish there's like a Swedish like wood underneath the sink with like kind of interesting like designs where you're like, what is that? And then you like lift up like this gorgeous wood like shelf, and it's like underneath there's just like some condoms. You're like, oh, that's what that is.
You're right.
And there's also
I think,
tampons, and there's also all these other things.
I think you're right. I think part of the reason it's so prevalent in like the gay areas is because of the high risk, right? Of
what are you saying? You say gay people are obsessed with sex?
No, but in particular with like HIV transmission,
true.
Or even STI, and the way that gay people engage in sex. Like on one hand, it's a scary thing, but on another thing, it's like also beautiful that it is like a community that's trying to look out for itself and say like, let's actually just be smart and have these available. Even that like governments and doctors' offices in queer neighborhoods like will have more access to those things because it's like more quote unquote important because it's more needed. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe in other bars, they're like, well, we're not actually hitting the target area because people here are either already have access to their own condoms or aren't looking for them, or are not at a high risk of something like an STI or accidental pregnancy. I don't know.
I still, if I became mayor of Toronto, that's what I would do. I have condoms and lube everywhere. And then I'd be like, and I quit. That's all I needed. Okay.
Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We hope Rihanna was great.
Yeah, let us know. Well, we'll know by now. Okay, see you guys next week.
Peace.